Hey, family, look at here. I am happy as I can be tonight or whenever you watch this podcast. I am me, Bishop John Seldis, and I'm here once again doing one of the things that has been brought me a great deal of joy, talking to folk that I either like, I love, or at least I want to like and love, having conversations about the things I want to have conversations about. That's a wow moment for me, and I'm thankful to the Almighty for the opportunity to do it tonight. This one is a special one. Our guest tonight. I was just reflecting with them for just a few moments. I've known for 20 plus years. I saw them as they had they were on stage sharing, I mean, dropping truth. I mean, it was scorched earth. And she was letting us have it in the way she can speak truth. She's a bit wiser these days, I guess we could say. She hails from the South Bronx, New York City. Got a little of that Dominican going on in the background. And she got all the pieces of paper, right? She went to school, got a couple of pieces of paper, done some study. She's served in the church as a pastor and a minister. She has. I've run into her in several spaces and places. She was doing a little thing, doing some social working. She was helping the people's. Then we were involved with the Poor People's Campaign, and she was, the new Poor People's Campaign with Bishop Barber, our friend and colleague. And then I was watching on the TV, and I was minding my own business, and all of a sudden they said that there was a candidate that had just been announced for the party for socialism and liberation. The Democratic Socialist Organization of some sort had announced they had a presidential candidate. Come to find out, it's this sister, it's my little sister who I know. And I was like, what? Hold on. And it was in that context that she reemerged for me in the public light. So I was scouring the internets, trying to find out what she was talking about, what the campaign was about. I was happy that she and, of course, our brother Cornel West were kind of doing a thing. They know each other, so it was beautiful to see and to witness folk that I love and regard and doing their thing and really bringing issues that normally don't ever be brought up on those platforms. And I am godly proud. We reconnected recently, and she said yes to coming on this little bitty show right here. And so let me bring to this platform my sister, friend for these number of years. Can I call you the Reverend? I am going to, just because I can. The Reverend Claudia De La Cruz. Come greet the people and everything. Yeah.
Hi,
Bishop.
How you? I'm red. You got me all red. I was yeah, that's very kind words coming from you, and always happy to be in your company, your family. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. See, I told the people, I told the people, I know that baby girl right there. I know her. And they oh, sure, you know everybody. You ought to hear my kids talk to me. You know everybody, Daddy. So I am I don't know everybody, but I know a couple of people, and I am pleased to that we get this opportunity to talk a little bit about. So let's go back to the beginnings. Let's go back to the beginnings. You come here, your people from the Dominican Republic,
Yeah.
and
My
right?
mom and dad came here from the Dominican Republic. I'm a second generation immigrant. My mom and my dad met in the Bronx, and here I am with two siblings.
Right. The Bronx, the Bronx. And so,
Yeah.
and you were, as I understand it, and I've heard people talk about who you were as a young teenager coming through the ranks, and you was fire from the beginning. They knew something was special. My people would say, you had some awe. You had some awe. You had the anointing was on you. And I've heard, I've been around some of your folk, and they talk about who you were when you were a little one, coming along. I encountered you when you were in seminary, when you were
Yeah.
in school,
Yeah. I was still
and
in seminary.
that's exactly right. You were doing work at Union at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and got to spend some time with you, and of course, get to know you and get to know the work and what you were doing there in New York City. Now, talk a little bit about the work once you got a little pieces of paper, and you was doing the work all along the way. But once you arrived, at a minute and a pause point, talk about some of the stuff you were doing and those projects out you were involved in,
Mm-hmm.
and some of that work I know you were doing. Talk a little
Mm-hmm.
bit about that, because that's your community organizing grounding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I started organizing when I was 13, and I started doing a lot of work around the Puerto Rican political prisoners in the 1990s. So folks that had been in prison for 20, 25 years at that point. We actually got a pardon for many of them in 1999. And the only one that remained was Oscar Lopez Rivera, who was released not long ago. He actually spent almost 30 somewhat years in prison. So I started doing work around that when I was 13. I did a lot of work with street organizations, or people call them gangs. So with the Latin Kings and Viñetas, and reconciling their, whatever issues they had, to then start doing work around police brutality during the 1990s. Did a lot of work around immigrant rights, around women's rights, but I was very young, and I was doing a lot of that work through church, like, and that was like the foundation of all my community organizing, actually, like understanding that there was a moral responsibility that we had with the rest of humanity and the planet to leave this earth better than what we found it, everything rooted from a space of faith, being a call to action and not a refuge. And so I was called to seminary, actually tasked by my by community. That was like, if you're out here preaching, you might as well get them papers. And they decided that Union would be a good place for me, because that would mean that I would stay in New York and still continue to do organizing. And it was hard to be at Union, because Union and Columbia University were, or are continuing to be, two big gentrifiers of the Harlem community. And so for me, coming into a space where I knew that folks, had been displaced, to be able to build those, and then come out and go to community board meetings against gentrification that Columbia was doing at the time, expanding all the way uptown, was highly contradictory. And I was fortunate enough to be in Union with when James Cone was there, when Dolores Williams was still there. There were still good folks. I mean, not that there aren't. There are obviously good folks at Union, but these iconic, folks that had the ability to make me understand that I was exactly where I needed to be to get what I really needed to get, to do what I needed to do. Because in many occasions I felt like this is definitely not where I am called to be, because the contradictions are too high. And I have had to be in many places that I often feel like I don't necessarily have to be in, but I have to occupy those spaces. And so, um, you know, I think that after Union and after meeting you, um, is when I kind of like became more formally engaged with the United Church of Christ. In 2007, I took over my home church, and I took over my home church for 8 years. and I did what I was called to do, which was minister. And then my elders got older. And the youth, went on to be young adults and went to college, and we lost the physical space, which was very, very grassroots. We didn't have a physical space like y'all had. Amistad Church was a beautiful sanctuary. We didn't have a sanctuary. We actually conducted service out of a community-based organizations in Washington Heights, because we didn't have a physical space. And because the UCC is congregational, the congregations are the ones that are responsible for upkeeping their churches. And so we didn't have a lot of support to be able to continue to do the work out of an actual physical space. The organization also got shut down during that time. And so we concluded that we would shut down the project, which was San Romero de las Americas Church, which was my home church and raised me to understand that our faith has political and social, spiritual dimensions, and that we need to be responsible with all of them, not just parts of it. And I just shifted the setting of my ministry, still ministering, but just shifted it a little bit.
Well, talk about thank you first off, and I remember the space you all were in. I remember you taking me and me sharing meal with the mommies down there, up in there, and you had to run off to do something another, and left me all. I was like, Lord, I don't speak no Spanish. Gracias.
But you were fine.
Listen, I felt at home because I knew mommies and stuff, but we was talking through hand motions and my little broken, bad Spanish, and their broken English, and we got along well. It was quite profound for me to watch how, in another setting, in another urban setting, New York City, right? The backdrop is New York City. It's right in the middle. That South Bronx, the Upper Harlem. It's all of that's right there. It was right there, and the work that you all were doing from scoop to nuts. Somebody needed some baby mama needed Pampers, to feeding folk, to Boo Boo done got himself on the wrong side of the law, so somebody had to go down. It was all the things. It's all the things, right? And then I kind of lost track of you for a little bit when the church closed, specifically. And so I would ask, where's Claudia? What? And I'd hear tell one thing and the next, and then you came up with the forum, the People's Forum, right? That's where you were. You started doing work there. Now, I'll tell you my connection to them. During my time in Chicago, before we came to Connecticut, I was in Chicago, as you know, and we had I had a relationship with the Evangelical Lutheran Church, the ELCA, and one of the sisters there invited me to a national conference that had world conference in connections, and it was the People's Forum National Gathering, right? And it was in Atlanta, and I saw all kinds of people. This was years ago. This was we were still in Chicago, so this would have been the late 90s, right? And I got connected with them. Now it's not the same group, but it's a talk to me about all of that and how all that connects.
So a lot of people get it. So there was a Breck Forum in New York City. And the Breck Forum actually was a physical space that did a lot of like Marxist education, a lot of internationalist education as well. And it actually is one of the places where, when I was coming up and I was kind of curious about anything that had to do with like Marxist theory, including like cultural theory, I'd go to the Breck Forum. And I think that if it was in the 90s, it might have been the Breck Forum. Now, the People's Forum, which is the organization that I co-founded, comes out of that tradition, because it's a physical space that combines a lot of the different elements of what we have done as grassroots organizers, right? Like the folks that came together and built it thought of all the different things that a place like that could offer in a city like New York, where a lot of physical spaces are being lost and people are kind of like looking for a space that has infrastructure that allows them to do whatever they dream to do to advance movement. And so when we thought about it, we said we wanted to be able to have a cafe area. So we built a cafe area in the front. We want to be able to have meeting rooms. So we have seminar rooms. We want to be able to have a place or a stage for folks to perform, because culture needs to be at the heart of the things that we do. And then we said, well, we'll need a place to do film screening. So we created a film screening space, which is the theater called the Paul Robeson film screening room. And then we said, well, we are going to need a place for people to actually come in and do banners and do placards. And so we expanded the space to have an art studio that's called the Elizabeth Catlett. Like, when you walk into the People's Forum, the idea is for folks to be able to imagine the type of collective living that we could have if we actually work and organize together. I'm a socialist. Like, as a socialist, a lot of the misconceptions of people is that socialism is kind of like, they think of like Russia, right? So like very square and very like dark, and all these things that we've been taught by our enemies, the people that hate us, that teach us history. We've kind of we've kind of like taken all that in, and when we hear the word socialism, at least when we did 10, 15 years ago, that's what we thought of. And so for me, it was kind of like, how do we allow people to see that socialism is actually beautiful, is actually in line with the dignity of our people? So it needs to look dignified, and needs to be dignified. The culture of the space needs to be one that is welcoming to everybody. And so, we built a space in that was open to the public in 2018. And it actually is really amazing to see the many different types of events that actually happen in one day. There's literally 4 or 5 different events happening in the space at a time. There's people that come in to have lunch and read a book. And you know how busy New York City is, but people find a certain level of peace in the space, but also a lot of knowledge. They engage with a lot of knowledge. And since the genocide in Gaza was accelerated, because that's also true, right? It was accelerated in 2023, but the genocide has been ongoing. We're just able to see it live stream now. But since the genocide accelerated in 2023, the People's Forum has been open for volunteer meetings every Monday. It's over 100 meetings that have been held for volunteers in the physical space, with over 200 volunteers meeting there every week. And so that's what that space was meant to be. And I'm really privileged, and I'm really like humbled by the opportunity of having worked collectively with folks to build that space. And so we did hold like national events. We held a socialism like conference in Atlanta in 2023 and 2024, actually, the summer of 2024. And then before that, we had held a People's Summit in LA in 2022. We have been like connected to national movements, obviously. So we were really close to the Poor People's Campaign. Even before we opened and launched the space, we were connected to the development of the new Poor People's Campaign with Reverend Dr. Barber and Reverend Dr. Theo Harris. And it was an amazing experience. Also, we got to meet a lot of different communities and struggle, a lot of different organizations doing a lot of movement work. And so, yeah, the space is there. It's actually moving into a new phase, because we were renting. We continue to rent in New York City. That's crazy. But we actually took yeah, it's crazy to rent in New York. It's bananas. So what we did was, because we have in so many ways grown, and the community support has also grown, we've gone beyond being a national organization or a local organization. We actually hold classes that thousands of people are a part of, and hybrid. So folks participate from all parts of the country and also all parts of the world. So we took the leap of buying a building. Um, and we are moving, hopefully in 2027. There's a lot of construction and a lot of things that need to happen. And I would ask, if folks want to follow the People's Forum, they should. They can do it on Instagram and any of the social media platforms, follow the People's Forum, and have access to, like, mostly free education. That's what we do. Free education for the people, at different levels. We have a bookstore, which is 1804 Books, and it's called 1804 after the Haitian Revolution, because we also want to be able to reclaim our history and have people ask us, what is 1804? Well, 1804 was the first Black-led revolution in this hemisphere, and actually was the inspiration for a lot of the abolitionist movements in this part of the world. And so, yeah.
So actually, sis, this is what I think church ought to be. Right? Quite frankly, I think it ought to be the place. And if you talk to my beloved, she'll tell you that my dreams about what I thought we should be doing as Amistad Church here in Hartford were along these kinds of lines. We're in Hartford, not New York City. Mm-hmm. So there's a reality, there's a locational reality to some of this, but it is, I think, the cross section of knowledge and information and history that actually lead us into discussion, contemplation, and reflection, and then action, right, around any number of things. I mean, let's follow the trajectory of the last 20 years from or say the last 25 years. So we had 9/11 that changed up everything, starting there in New York City, to the war in Iraq. Interestingly enough, 25 years later, here we are in the same part of the world dropping more bombs. But I'm trying to I'm not gonna get there yet. But here we are. We have this whole war, Afghanistan, and all the things that happened during that period of time, 25 years ago, that led us to the electing of a Black man for president of the United States, and that historic run. And I say is due in large measure to our newly minted ancestor, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. May he rest in peace and power. The work that his bridging of the civil rights movement to that moment, and of course, we existed, it was tough. It was tough for a brother, and I get it, but it was tough. President Obama dropped more bombs in drones and sent more people, deported more people than lots of other presidents combined. So, I mean, there's conversation to be had all around. But here we are. We get in, I believe, direct backlash of his two elections and his two terms. We got the Orange Man. That's what I call him. And the first term of the occupier of the White House today. And then that period of time with President Biden, and the geopolitical and economic strivings, right? I don't want to talk about the rich people. I want to talk about the poor people, the disenfranchised people, the dispossessed folk, the folk on the margins, the folk that we deal with from day to day. Those folk were catching it. They've been catching it these 25, 26 years. Yeah. So that leads us to what we were trying to do in resurrecting the unfinished work of the Poor People's Campaign that Dr. King really conceived in 1967 when he said, listen, I'm coming out against the war in Vietnam. and there are triplets of evil, you know, racism, militarism, and materialism. He was talking economics and he was linking them together, that you can't talk about one without the other. They come together. And I love the way Angela Davis remixed it and said, you got to put some sexism on it, because that just that's all of that rolls in a pack together. And interestingly enough, making that connection, in many ways probably lifted up the fact that he was beginning to make linkages, Dr. King, in 69 and I'm sorry, 67 and 68, that probably led to his ultimate assassination, right?
Most definitely led to
right.
his assassination.
So you got Hugo Chavez sitting with Dorothy Day, and Dorothy Horta, and all of the folk who were doing all of the kind of grassroots movement. They were all coming together. There were 30 organizations in the original Poor People's Campaign, cross nationally, that were coming together. Of course, Dr. King's assassination probably deflated much of that. But here, I'm naming all of this because they are all connected. Here we jumpstart. We come, years later, 40 years later, here we were in Washington, D.C., in New York City, and around this country, revisiting this movement of poor people, dispossessed people, folk on the edges, on the margins, in this kind of rainbow coalition, if you will, of multi-faiths, social, identities, multi in so many ways, and to do the work of both what it means to reclaim or to claim who we are and whose we are, I would say, but also how and what ways we move together, and not wait on the folk to give out the handouts, not wait for those to be involved, to do the right thing. I think there's a place for that. But really claim our own space and figure that out. That's what I love about some of what you're doing with the People's Forum. It is people doing the people's work about people, right? It's at that area. So talk to us a little bit about, from there, how did you get to running for president? That's what we all want to know. Where'd that come from?
Well, you know me well. You know that. I mean, I'm an organizer. I'm an educator. Like that's what I've done for most of my life, and so part of that called me in some ways of becoming part of a political party that is a socialist party, which is the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Why? Because I feel like in order for us to be able to move things forward, we have to, in many ways, break the isolation and break the value of individualism, which is what is often sipped into us consistently. Like, we need to look out for ourselves before we look out for anybody else. And again, like I said from the beginning, like, faith has been at the root of everything and anything that I have ever done. And understanding, again, that faith is a call to action, and understanding that in so many ways, socialism is closer to Christianity than, the capitalist system that we have today, that has people praying over a man in the Oval Office to bomb children in Iran, to continue to, his genocidal drive on the people of Palestine, to continue to squeeze the people of Cuba and the people of Venezuela. Like, I don't believe in that God. And so if I don't believe in that God, and I believe that God is more on a path of justice and a path of creating a world of equity, then I need to be with a collective of people that believe the same thing, and a collective of people that actually are doing this thing every day, in and out, and understanding that there's a need to sacrifice, and that sacrifice will become a responsibility, and that responsibility would ultimately become, us actually seeing the fruit of all that work in the revolution that needs to happen in this country. And so in 2020, I said, I'm going to be part of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, who I've had a relationship at that point for 19 years, which was kind of like as long as the party had been around. We had marched together. We had developed campaigns together in New York City. I had been with some of them, my comrades in Venezuela. I had been with some of them in Cuba. So it's like, these are my friends. These are my comrades. I need to find some sort of community. It was 2020. It was COVID. And these were the folks that were organizing a lot of protests actually around George Floyd. They were also organizing a lot of the cancel the rent caravans in Los Angeles. So they were doing work during COVID. I was like, I think I'm down to do this. So I became a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And then I started doing a lot of the education work connected to the party. And the way that I was asked was basically, there was a nomination, obviously, there was a process internally, but I was asked to either take it or reject the nomination. And the way that I was asked was that one thing that made the whole difference, because it was very much like, do you want to be engaged in doing mass education? And I was like, bet, like a mass education, like for the people, I'm down to do it every day. And then, after that, it was kind of like, well, you're going to do it in this way. Like, this is the instrument we're utilizing. We're utilizing the presidential campaign to do it. And then I asked the second question, like, I'm super ratchet. Can I just be myself? And the response was like, just be yourself. And I was like, all right.
You're not that ratchet. You're not that ratchet. But you from the neighborhood. So I mean, so you this is, you talk plainly.
Yeah, I speak plainly. I do my best to speak from where I know, and then what I don't know, we could figure it out together. And so the party was very like supportive and very helpful. And obviously, I was kind of like the person front facing, but it was an entire party that was there. The platform that was developed, was a platform that is basically the demands of the people. Like, is it possible for this country to cut their military budget by 90%? Yes, it is. It's totally possible. They have $1 trillion that are allocated to war. And we don't have healthcare, and we don't have housing. And, students, people that want to go to college, are becoming more indebted over and over and over again. Like, people are not having kids or getting married or leaving their parents' homes because there's no sense of future in this country. The levels of depression in this country are crazy, in terms of like young people not feeling like they have a future. And so we live in the wealthiest country in the world. Like, it's not lack of wealth, it's the lack of will and the lack of political vision for providing for the people. And so, building that platform that said exactly that, let's cut the military budget by 90%. There are thousands of corporations in this country, thousands of corporations that are multi-million-dollar corporations. Let's just seize 100 of those, just 100, the top 100. And maybe if we seize the top 100 that have control over big pharma, we could actually give people free healthcare. Like, we take over, those that have a hold of the banks. People don't have to worry about mortgages, because ultimately, you don't own your house when you have a 30-year-old mortgage, And so these are things that make sense, that are possible, that are doable, but that, again, neither the Democrats or the Republicans will do it because it touches their profit. And so it was an opportunity to also demonstrate to people that we cannot think about our political power solely around the ballot. I was like, I actually had to go to Ohio not long ago and revisit, in many ways, Malcolm X's The Ballad of the Bullet, right? Like, people often talk about him as if he was like promoting violence, but no, like, The bullet is organizing unions, is organizing student organizations, is organizing against the war, is so much more than the literal bullet, right? Like, we need to be able to, yeah, claim the democratic rights that a lot of our ancestors fought for, and understand that they fought for more, that that wasn't the only thing they were fighting for. And so, yeah, we need to be able to do that, defend it, because obviously is under attack now more than ever. But we also need to understand that politics is done every day in the ways in which we organize ourselves. And the campaign allowed us to say that. It allowed us to go into communities that had been abandoned by both parties, communities that didn't care whether you said, well, I'm from the Party for Socialism and Liberation. After we ended conversations with them, they're like, well, I think I'm a socialist. Pretty much. Like, you want dignity, you want life. Like, you don't want to live the way you do. And that aspiration might have them calling you a socialist. So why not just claim it?
Well, let's be clear. We're in a different day today
Yeah.
in New York City,
Oh yeah, we are.
because the mayor of New York City might be a socialist.
Yeah. He's a democratic socialist. You know what? And the interesting piece of it all is that more than him, right? Because we also have to think, kind of like zoom out and not think necessarily about the individuals. I feel like it's important to say that there was an entire grassroots movement that actually positioned him where he is today.
That's
Like
right.
grassroots movements, people, young people that have been in the movement against genocide, you know, young people who understand that there's a need for something different. And obviously, you know, there's such a limitation to the democracy that we have, right? Like, there's other countries that have 6, 7, 8 different parties to choose from. We have two political parties, and we call that democracy. Two political parties that are basically two wings of the same bird. And we saw that. We saw that in the DNC in 2024. We saw that in the Republican convention too in 2024, when they were actually debating on who would have the strongest military force. They were debating on who was going to be in the best side of the border union patrol. Like, it was crazy. There was no talk about inflation. There was no talk about people's hardships. There was no talk about ending the genocide in Gaza, stopping the aid to Israel. So it's like, when you have that, and you have young people that are out there demanding for the 25-year-old project of neoliberalism to end, and they see this young, charismatic democratic socialist saying, you know what, we're gonna talk about affordability, and we're going to talk about how we're going to get babies into daycare. Like, it's the most basic thing. It's like, it's really not that radical, really. It's like the most basic thing that young and just working class people have demanded for many decades. And you have someone saying, this is what we're going to do, but we're going to do it together. It changes everything. And I think that that's where we are in New York City, with a mayor that's willing to be in conversation with the grassroots movement, and a whole population of young people that are saying, like, if you don't give us what we want, it's not gonna look pretty for you either.
Yeah, yeah. And let me say this: there's not just young people in that are thinking some of these thoughts.
I know, but there's a lot of us. Listen, my knees hurt most of the time.
When I met you, you was young girl. Let's say that right there. Let's say that. So,
I was
so
younger.
you were a young girl. I was too. There's no grade. Now it's a lot of grade. So here's what you are naming for me, and I think it's important. It's an important distinction for me. We've never really quite had a. We've never had a democracy. This ain't what we call a democracy. Not for real. There's some technical terms, and you and I went to school long enough to know what to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the reality, at least for me. What has now occurred and what has now been offered up is, I call it, we're in full-fledged free fall at the national federal level. It is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what this is anymore. God gave me a vision when we saw. I've been in the White House a couple of times, right? And when I had an aerial shot, there was an aerial view back in the fall of the year of the east wing of the White House that had just been destroyed, right? And I that had a very spiritual moment when I looked at that, and the Spirit said, "This is what this government has become. It's destroyed." Right. And then I began to think down through a number of the realities that Doge and some of the other departments had just was ripping out, doing stuff and firing folk, and then we don't know, we don't have the codes, we don't have the number up, we can't really actually fire them people, we got to hire them back. It was all of the mass chaos of the early few weeks, quite frankly, in this current regime, that just made it very clear to me that what we have at the federal level is just, I don't know where we go end, but whatever it is that we used to have is no more. And quite frankly, where we got to turn our attention on, and this is the gospel I've been preaching here in Connecticut, and wherever I can, I get a mic and a platform or a bullhorn. What do we do in response to how do we feed one another? How do we clothe one another? How do we house one another? That the work of providing the basic things. Can I preach for just a second? Jesus said, when you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. And then the disciples said, well, Jesus, when were you hungry? When were you in prison? Here's the opportunity to live out. And I think the lie we received is that somehow socialism was connected to communism, which was evil, right? When in fact, if we're talking about communism, we're talking about having things in common. That sounds very biblical to me.
I mean, that's what the followers of Jesus, that's what they were on.
They was on that tip, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's something to it that we have to value differently. And quite frankly, my generation and the folk before me, in fact, spent a lot of our time and energy in what I would call electoral political worlds, right? Electoral politics was going to be a savior or bring us to somewhere. And it did what it did. And I'm not necessarily, yeah, I am. I'm saying we got to do some other things, right? We got to do some other things.
I agree.
Do some other things.
You mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King, right? Like, if we've actually paid attention and we've read, where do we go from here? Community or chaos?
Chaos.
Woo. He was exploring, he was thinking through, he was reflecting on the years to get to a point where people had access and were recognized, at the very basic way as humans. Like, Black people are human beings. The most basic, recognize us legally as such. But then he says, that's not enough. In that book, he says, this is a first phase of a revolutionary process. Right. And before that, it was Black Reconstruction. Right. So it's like you have the Reconstruction era, you have the Civil Rights movement. What is going to be our moment today is the huge question. Because if we've already understood in the last 20 somewhat years that voting has not gotten us out of the hole, in fact, it has allowed for the Democrats and the Republicans to kind of play on and play off with our emotions, to then weaponize those emotions and against us and against our interests. Like, if we've understood that, then we know that that's not the only thing we need to do. And it's very you mentioned, when Dr. Martin Luther King actually got to the economic piece, that's when he got killed. When Malcolm X was acknowledging that, listen, I'm not even going to talk about religion. My religion is my own thing. It's my thing. It's my personal thing. He said it in that 1964 speech, the Battle of the Bullet. He said, I'm a Muslim. I will always be a Muslim, but that's my thing. And Dr. Martin Luther King is a Christian. And then he started naming all the other Christian pastors that were in that space. And he said, we all have one thing in common. We want a better world, basically. And we're out here to build it. Whatever is not in common, we won't even mention it. That's our own personal business. And I think we need to get to that space where we're like, you know what? We have a lot of differences, but we have one thing in common, and it's that we have an entire system that's acting against us. And so I would love, one of the reasons why I kind of moved away from the church was it was too passive. It was too passive. It was a space where people went in on a Sunday, and that was service. And I believe you go in on a Sunday to be fortified, to start service the minute you walk out of church. It's a whole different form of existing in the Christian faith. And so I would go, after my church was done, I would go to spaces kind of like trying to find that substance. But what folks were talking about was too abstract for me, was too kind of outside of the realm of reality. And so I wasn't looking for something to become addicted to or something to numb me, which is basically what I've found, religiosity to kind of be in some ways. That's not how I was raised. That's not the church I went to. That's not the church I believe in. That's not the God that I believe in. That's not the God of Malcolm. That's not the God of Harriet. That's, you know what I'm saying? So it's like there's a level of fire that is missing from church communities. And I want to be able to challenge people to think about like that fire, a fire that burns, that transforms, that allows space for new to be born. And I think that in many ways, that's what's needed. I feel like there's multiple fronts to be fought, like multiple fronts. Like, yeah, mutual aid is important. And in that way, when we do mutual aid, when we support our people, when we give, from ourselves and what we have, there's also the teaching aspect of it. Like, why isn't the government doing this? Like, you pay taxes. People, even when people don't work, you pay taxes because you go into a place and you buy something and there's tax put on that. So it's like, so why aren't they? We're taking care of them to go bomb kids across the seas, but they can't take care of us. And that needs to be part of it. That's what the Black Panthers did. People often think about the mutual aid of the Panthers and they think about it as if they were just receiving food. And it's like, no, that's not how it worked. Actually, it was a community effort. People felt as they were meant to feel like agents of change. Like you didn't just show up to be fed. You showed up also to contribute. And so I think in many ways we need to think about ways in which we fight this fight in multiple levels and multiple fronts from the spaces that we occupy with the best skills that we have, but not in isolation. There needs to be a point where the church speaks to the unions, when the unions speak to the student leaders, when the student leaders speak to, because we can't do it on our own. And the system has done a lot of intentional work to divide us. If you are an immigrant and you do immigrant rights work, you work here. If you're LGBTQ and you do LGBTQ work, you do it here. If you're a woman and you do women's rights, you do it here. And it's like, no, because we don't live compartmentalized lives. Like we're whole human beings. And at the basis of all of this is whether we have access to the most basic things or not. Like the reality is that you could be a Black trans woman, immigrant, you know what I'm saying? Like you have all this multiplicity of oppression. Then if everything is divided, that's your whole experience will be divided. So we need to be able to build organizations that have the ability to bring all these things together and teach people how to fight. And teaching people about how to fight is not done in isolation. And so I feel like, when you talked about Trump and what he's doing and the federal government, I don't think it's Trump's plan alone. I think it's a plan to reorganize the entire government in a way that works for billionaires in this country. And it's the stage has been set. You mentioned Obama. Obama built the cages that Trump has used. Like all these Democrats have pumped money into ICE year after year. They have defunded schools year after year. They have prioritized war year after year. So we cannot continue to think that they're going to do anything different when the whole system is reorganized by Trump domestically and externally, because they're doing that also internationally, that somehow they're going to come back and roll back everything to where it was before. No, they're reorganizing the whole structure. And we have to understand that. And if we don't have the capacity to come together and organize ourselves outside of that little game that they have us playing and have had us playing ourselves in for such a long time, we're going to continue to lose.
That's right. It is very clear to me that what we now must prioritize is how do we come together and build coalition? How do we work together? How do we see each other outside of the ways we've been used to and or have been programmed to see each other? We've got to see each other through the lenses that say in Ubuntu. Ubuntu, I see you. So King said it like this. He said, listen, I can't be all I can be until I am in fact engaged and involved helping you be all of who you are. We are tied together in a mutual garment. Let me say it this way, a mutual garment of destiny, right? I cannot be in Atlanta and not also somehow, when hearing the call, seeing the struggle, come to Birmingham. This is all his for me, the letter in the Birmingham jail is my fifth gospel, right? It is King making this case that we can't be who we fully are until we are being for each other. In other
That's
words,
right.
it is in that space he then says injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That has a whole there's a built argument, a context for which I believe it is the foundation of the work we got here. Now, we ain't got but a little bit more time, and I ain't gonna occupy. You got a little one that you got to get to. There's some homework I heard in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you were just in South Africa.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you were doing and some of the work that you are now seeding outside of running for president. Lord have mercy.
I mean, a lot of what my work has been understanding exactly the last words that you mentioned, which is basically this question of seeing ourselves in others and understanding, that our price to pay as people in this planet is to be in solidarity with humanity. Like that, we need to occupy the space that we have again to make sure that things are better than where we found them when we actually depart from this earth. And I've had the privilege to work with different international networks across the globe, and we met there to be in conversations and exchange with not only our South African comrades, but also other comrades from around the world, and get a better sense of internationally how are things doing. A lot of the conversation was mostly around Cuba, which is very interesting. Cuba is now being suffocated by the US government. It has been suffocated for over 60 years. I mean, $15 million a day is stolen from the Cuban economy. $15 million a day. We're talking about over $160 billion in the course of 60 plus years. And then you have the United States say something like, the Cuban government is the problem, while the US has the US has an economic blockade on Cuba that is suffocating the economy, that doesn't allow Cuba to be in business with other countries, that doesn't allow Cuba to purchase things as basic as antibiotics, as painkillers. Now they have sanctions on oil. And so the Cuban people have fallen into even a deeper crisis where hospitals don't have electricity, where schools don't have electricity. And Trump, when asked, okay, well, what are your plans after Iran? Basically, Cuba's next, right? And he says things like, Cuba will collapse or we will actually go in there. And we know that he has no sense of international law. He kidnapped the president, a whole ass president, excuse my French. He kidnapped the president from Venezuela, like literally went in there, bombed, guns blazing, and kidnapped the president and the first lady of another country and proceeded to bring them to New York and parade them. Like, the man who has no sense of law domestically, that has like unleashed the brutality of ICE all across this country, that has accelerated the levels of aggression of the police state, is also causing damage in places like Cuba, in places like Venezuela. It's offering to cause issues for Colombia, for Mexico, if they don't bow down to him, right? And so it's funny, I go to South Africa, and in South Africa, they're talking about how Cuba had the courage to face the apartheid regime in South Africa and fight alongside with Angola. How Cuba has more in common with the Black people of that continent than the United States of America. And it's something that people, and I'm gonna talk to my kin, my Black folk, can't seem to understand, that the Cuban people have way more in common with us than any of these so-called leaders of this country. And we're allowing for Cuba, that has showed up for Africa time and time and time and time again, to be choked out of their lives. And so I was there. I'm actually going to Cuba on a delegation that is there to bring solidarity. We're going to bring a ton of aid. So we're bringing health, like medicine. We're bringing, women's hygiene products. We're bringing children's medicine. A lot of the folks that are suffering, obviously, and continue to suffer in any case of war, are women and children. And as a mom, I cannot imagine having to have needs for my kid and not be able to have the resources. And so there's also a campaign for solar panels that has raised close to $500,000 to purchase solar panels that can allow us to light up some of those hospitals and schools. And so we're going to continue to have an ongoing campaign around Cuba, and do more solidarity work just in this region specifically, because the Trump administration really wants to hit in multiple fronts to create the level of chaos that doesn't allow people to respond adequately. And I think the people of the United States have a responsibility with the rest of the world, because if we think about every war that has ever damaged like the living conditions and the life-saving infrastructure in other countries, it has been led by the United States. You think about Iraq, you think about Afghanistan, Libya, Congo, Sudan, like you could go down that list and it has the US stamp all over it. And yes, we don't benefit from the war as working class people. We don't. Billionaires do. But our complicity and our silence are a way of allowing them to continue to do what they do. So we need to be in solidarity with our kin outside of this country and understand that to the extent that we're able to demand for them to be allowed to breathe, we're also fighting for ourselves to be allowed to breathe. And so now ED at IFCO, Pastors for Peace, which is an interreligious foundation for community organization that has been around for 57 years. It was founded by Reverend Lucius Walker, and it introduced me to solidarity work at 13, and now I get to be the ED. Big shoes to fill, but I'm excited to be there and doing this work. So that's why I was in South Africa. I'm part of a platform called the International People's Assembly, which brings together over 200 organizations and social movements from around the world. And we meet and we have conversations and plan collective action. So
listen. I want to be a part of whatever that is you're doing. And on the real tip, since you are doing what I knew and you could see, following the plan of God for your life, and doing it in kind of grand and spectacular ways, but also for the folk. and you make us very proud. Every time I see you and up there bearing witness, however you bear witness, you're bringing it, and you're bringing it for the folk. Um, let's obviously be in more regular conversation. I'd love to have you come back on this platform. Anytime you want to. You want to chop it up. Let's do it. And I tell you what, the conversation, we didn't even begin to talk about places like the place that little island that your people from, that split in two. It's the same island. Dominicans and Haiti, same island, and yet one folk, in a way that Korea is one people. North Korea and South Korea, that's one people.
Korea. Yeah,
that's one Korea. In the same way, we got 2-3 different kind of Congos in the middle part of Africa, right? The Tutsis and the Hutu in Rwanda, they one people. They want people who are related to the Kenyans and the Tanzanians in East Africa. The conversation, and Lord, don't let me start talking. We went to Brazil and fell in love with our people down in Brazil. Oh my God! Ain't nothing there but black people. Now they claim they something else, but they're not. They're not. I am so very clear that our real salvation is not reaching for folk out there somewhere to do something for us. It is us reaching within ourselves
to do it,
to do for ourselves. And so that's got to happen. That's got to happen block by block, town by town, city by city. And then reaching across all of the ways we have been divided, and to see our common humanity. And in some ways, and I know these are words, and it's kind of hyperbolic in some sense, and I get that. But actually, there's some real positivity that actually is what we are tapping into. We are still telling the story of a Palestinian Jew named Jesus. 2,000 years later, and somehow or another, those stories we are retelling, especially now during Lent, have some kind of power to speak to our lives in ways. I mean, and I'm just talking as a follower of Jesus. Don't know about that Christianity. Sometimes it gets on my nerves, and the church for shown up gets on my nerves, and yet there's a power there that I cannot somehow disregard. In essence, in the same ways, these powerful groups and organizations that you're a part of are witnessing that we need to be in solidarity and conversation with one another, and we all have a part of what the answers are.
Of course.
If we have questions, there are answers to be had. Listen, I have occupied your time long enough. That baby need you to help him finish them, put them words, them sentences, and all. I thank you very much for the time you just gave us and my community here that will listen to you. We are so very proud to be connected and kin with you. Don't leave me out of stuff, because I think we want to be a part. We want to be a part of some of that. We need to be talking about Cuba. Asada was there, and they held her tight. Even when the other dude was trying to try to work a deal. If you give us, Sister Shakur, then no, she ours. And so that kind of way. We got to be connected to one another in these kinds of ways. Let's keep talking soon. Love to you and all the peoples down there. Back at you. And I'll tell you, extend your greetings to our people here, and we'll be in touch soon.
Please give a huge hug to Pam for me.
I will do. Listen, family, what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep at it. Tomorrow night, I'm having a special show. We're gonna come on especially tomorrow night. If you're watching us on you all know we're live on Mondays for sure. But we're gonna do some conversation um, since we've had 2 shootings here in the city. Over the course of 9 days, 2 men were shot by the police when the calls were for mental health help. These men were having mental health crises of some sort, and they both end up dead. And somehow or another, that's something. Something ain't right, and some don't smell right, and it keeps happening. And so we're gonna have some conversation with some of our activists and some of our leaders here in the city of Hartford, and I'm just talking about Hartford, across this state and across the region, and in fact across the country. What looks very much like what was happening in Minneapolis, or what was happening in Los Angeles, or what was happening in Chicago, what is happening in New York City, or happening in Memphis, Tennessee. They're the same issues and the same concerns. And here we are, we're doing our best to, one, be in conversation with folk to say this is what's happening, and 2, let's be in one mind and try to piece together a plan to keep it pushing.
That's right.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. See y'all. Peace.
Bye.